Tonight, the second it gets dark, you'll do something you've done 10,000 times without once thinking about it. You'll brush your hand against a wall, a switch clicks, and the whole room turns to daylight. Free, instant, completely unremarkable. So let me tell you how insane that would have looked to almost every human who ever lived. For 99.9% of our time on this planet, that switch did not exist, and neither did anything like it. When the sun went down, the world didn't dim into some cozy gloom. It was dilated, a darkness so total you couldn't find your own hand in front of your face. And here's the thing that reframes all of it. Light used to be one of the most expensive things a person could buy. An economist named William Nordhaus actually measured this. And, he found that in ancient Babylon, a full day's wages bought you maybe 10 minutes of feeble lamplight. Light was rationed. Darkness was just the default setting of human life. For over 300,000 years, every ancestor you've ever had spent roughly half their existence in it. No candles. For most of that time, just black sky, stars, and whatever fire they could keep breathing. So what did they actually do in all those hours? Night after night? For 10,000 generations? The answer is stranger than you'd think, and it kind of rewrites what we believe about sleep, and stories, and what it even means to be human. Let me show you what we threw away without ever noticing. So start with fire, because fire is what made all of this possible. The oldest hard evidence of humans teaming it comes from Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, burnt bone and ash from, roughly 1 million years ago. But fire didn't just warm people up. It reached into the human day and rebuilt it from scratch. Picture life before it. You were just another primate. Sun goes down, you climb a tree or wedge yourself into some crevice, and you do not move, because moving in the dark meant becoming a meal. Our night vision is, a joke next to the things that hunted us. Leopards, hyenas, the big cats could all see you perfectly while you flailed around blind. And fire rewrote that overnight. A campfire throws a ring of safety maybe 30 feet wide, and inside it, predators won't cross. But outside it, your food. And that's not poetry. Anthropologists watching modern hunter-gatherer groups have actually recorded that the people who drift away from the fire at night are the ones far more likely to be killed. Still, today, but fire's biggest gift wasn't safety. It was time. Before fire, your useful day ended the instant the sun did. 12 hours in summer, as few as 8 in deep winter. Then fire bolted 2 to 4 extra hours onto the back of every single day. And you stack that up over thousands of generations. And those stolen hours didn't just fill themselves, they changed what we are. So in 2014, an anthropologist named Polly Wisner published a study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. She'd spent years quietly recording what people actually talked about among the Juhanzi of the Kalahari, one of the last communities still living close to the old way. And by daylight, about 80% of the talk was just admin. Who's hunting where, which plants are ripe, who's annoyed at who's what, pure logistics. But the moment the fire was lit, the whole texture of the conversation changed. After dark, 81% of it turned to stories. Distant in people, adventures where the world came from, jokes that doubled the whole camp over. And Wiesner argued that the firelight is, like, literally where culture was born. The first theater, the first classroom, the first teacher. The first place humans ever learned to imagine things that weren't right in front of them. It's where we became us. But the fire wasn't the only thing happening out there in the dark. There was something else. Something science only really tripped over again in the last 30 years or so. And it's this. You were never built to sleep the way you'll sleep tonight. So in 2001, a historian named Roger E. Kirch detonated the science of sleep almost by accident. He was digging through these old English court records, and he kept snagging on a phrase that, made no sense to him. People mentioning their first sleep, casually, like everyone just knew what that meant. One of them was a deposition from 1699, a girl who'd woken after her first sleep. And it was so offhand, so unexplained, that it had to be pointing at something everyone once understood and we'd completely forgotten. So he chased it, and 16 years and more than 500 references later, diaries, medical manuals, prayer books, court testimony, even Homer, they all said the same impossible thing. First sleep. They'p. One Hemer. They all said the same impossible thing. First and second sleep. Now, before the industrial world, people didn't sleep in one block. They'd go down soon after dark, sleep about 4 hours, and then wake up on purpose, calmly, in the dead middle of the night. They'd stay up an hour or two, and then they'd sink back into a second sleep until dawn. Nobody panicked. Nobody called a doctor. It was just how humans slept for thousands of years, and it goes back a long, long way. The Romans wrote about the primus somnus, the first sleep, and even Thucydides drops the phrase after first sleep into a war history. That waking gap in the middle, it even had names. The French called it the dorvée. The English just called it the watch, and people used it. Prayer manuals from the 1400s included special prayers written for these exact hours. Couples used it. A 16th century physician swore it was the best window for, that. People got up and smoked, stoked the fire, slipped next door to talk to a neighbor, or just turned over the dreams they'd had while they were still warm. And Benjamin Franklin, centuries later, liked to spend the gap sitting stark naked by an open window, taking what he called an air bath. And here's the kicker. Historians had been reading first sleep for centuries and quietly mistranslating it every single time into something vaguer, because they could not imagine humans sleeping any way but hours. The bias ran so deep that they literally bent ancient Greek and medieval Latin to fit modern bedtimes. The truth was sitting there in plain text the whole time, and nobody could see it. So then science walked up and confirmed the whole thing. In 1992, a psychiatrist named Thomas Wehr, over at the National Institute of Mental Health, ran this beautifully simple experiment. He took a group of volunteers, and he took away their artificial light. 14 hours of darkness, every night, for a month. So roughly what your pre-fire ancestors would have lived in. And within a few weeks, every single one of them drifted into the same rhythm nobody had taught them. About 4 hours of sleep, then 1 to 3 hours of quiet wakefulness. Then 4 more hours down. Their bodies just remembered, like some old program had been sitting in there the entire time, buried under a lifetime of light bulbs. And when Wehr measured their blood during that wakeful gap, he found something kind of strange. They weren't awake the way you're awake right now. Their brains were flooded with prolactin, the sane, calm hormone you get during deep meditation, or right after sex. They described the feeling as peaceful, drifting, almost meditative. So it wasn't a hole in their sleep at all. It was a third state of mind, one that most people alive today have never once felt. So what killed it? One thing, light. And remember how expensive light used to be? That right there is the whole story. For most of history, burning the night was a luxury that almost nobody could afford. The president of Harvard wrote in his diary, back in 1743, that it took his whole household 2 full days just to make 78 pounds of candles. And then 6 months later, he just writes, "Candles all gone." George Washington once worked out that burning a single good candle 5 hours a night cost him the equivalent of 1,000, and the poor? They couldn't even dream of it. They soaked dried rushes in grease for a few dim minutes of light at a time. Darkness wasn't a choice. It was the price of being human. Then, piece by piece, we drove that price down to zero. Street lamps showed up in the 1600s, Paris first, under Louis XIV, who basically wanted fewer murders in his city. Then, in 1792, an engineer named William Murdoch lit his own house with coal gas, and within a generation, gas lamps were crawling across the cities of Europe. Coffee houses started staying open all night, and then in 1879, Edison made the electric bulb cheap. And, the war on darkness was basically won. Today, the same hour of light that cost Washington a small fortune cost you a fraction of a second of your wages. And the night that humans had known for 300,000 years just ended. So here's a little fossil of how seriously people once took the dark. The word curfew, it comes from the Old French couvre-feu, which literally means cover the fire. In medieval towns, a bell would ring at night, and everyone would bank or smother their flames, and not for fire safety. Because night was supposed to be dark. Night was for sleeping. Night was when you were soft and exposed. In some cities, you couldn't even legally walk the streets after dark without a lantern. And in one stretch, Paris actually made residents hand their house keys over to the authorities at night and lock themselves inside until morning. The dark belonged to criminals, to spirits, to things you didn't even name. People feared it in a way we really can't feel anymore. And then we conquered it. We flooded it with light, and we called it progress. But look at the bill for all that. You now sit in artificial light for, 7, 8 hours after sunset? And that light, especially the blue glow coming off a screen, it jams your body's melatonin, which is the hormone that's supposed to start your night. Your brain just can't tell a phone from the sun. So light hits your eyes at 11 at night, and your brain kind of shrugs and goes, must be daytime. And it pushes the melatonin back, and it chops your sleep up, and it drags a clock that took millions of years to build completely out of sync. So how fixable is this? Almost embarrassingly. A sleep researcher named Kenneth Wright took a group of people camping with no artificial light at all, and their melatonin reset back towards sunset by nearly 2 hours. And here's the wild part. A follow-up found that even a single weekend got you most of the way there, and the effect was strongest in winter when the nights run the longest. So that's all it takes. One weekend in the dark, and 300,000 years of programming comes flooding right back. So sit with what we actually traded away here. We didn't just move our bedtime. We erased an entire state of human consciousness. That calm, floating, prolactin-soaked hour between first and second sleep. And for most people now, it's just gone. So when our bodies still try to reach for it, when you snap awake at 2 in the morning and you're just lying there in the dark, we don't even recognize it. We call it insomnia. We call it broken. We medicate it. But what if it was never broken? What if waking up in the middle of the night isn't a malfunction at all, but the oldest, most human thing your body knows how to do? Just reaching for a rhythm that we paved over and forgot. The thing you call insomnia might just be the ghost of the Dorvale, because for 300,000 years, your ancestors lived a night that we can barely even picture. They told stories into the fire that built whole civilizations. They slept in 2 halves with a quiet thinking hour tucked right in between them. They lived under a darkness so complete that the Milky Way wasn't something you drove to a national park to go see. It was just the ceiling, the ordinary every night sky. And in that gap between first and second sleep, when they woke, they didn't reach for anything. They just lay there in the dark, and they thought about their lives, their dreams, the morning that was coming. We traded every last bit of that for a switch on the wall. And the strangest part? Almost none of us ever even noticed it was gone.